So we really thought that making a sea change was going to mean that, with less commutes and a bigger house and everything, that life was just going to be so much less stressful. And it is, but I wouldn't say that it was stress less. I wish I'd known or even thought about some of the things that do add a little bit of pressure in the area of the family, in the area of the house, in friendships and career issues as well. Hi, we're Carly and James Hopgood, and we made a sea change back in 2017 by moving from the hustle and bustle of Sydney, Australia, all the way to regional New Zealand. And it's been quite a journey. So we thought we'd share with you some of the things that we wish we'd known or thought about before we did the sea change.
One of the things I wish we'd considered or thought aloud a little bit more about before making that sea change decision was the double-edged sword about having a larger house or a bigger backyard. Now there's nothing better than, for me anyway, from getting home from work and being able to throw the ball, kick a ball around with my boys in the backyard. And I know from coming from living in Sydney in apartment style, my uncle who also lived in Sydney always used to say to me, you got nowhere to, kick a ball around. You got to put your barbecue into the car to go to the park. You can't walk around your backyard you're just in your underwear with a beer. And, I always wanted that, but I think it's one of those things that there's a bit of a trade-off from having that we just haven't really considered.
The trade-off is that with a bigger backyard and a bigger house comes a bigger maintenance to-do list. And it ends up taking quite a bit of time that you wouldn't have to do if you were in an apartment where you can kind of walk out and set and forget. You can walk away, go away for a week's holiday and not really worry about it. It also does take a lot of time on the weekends to be able to maintain all of those different aspects of a larger house and larger backyard. Unless you decide that you want to pay someone to do it, which sounds great. But the other thing to consider in moving to the regions, depends where you move, but one of the things that I wish I'd realised was it's actually quite hard to find people who will willingly do things like gardening and cleaning. So there's a smaller workforce and it's much harder to find people who are great gardeners, great cleaners, who you can pay a bit more to and they do a wonderful job. In the regions, that's much harder to find.
Another thing I wished we'd thought about or considered before making that sea change decision was, yes, we're going to have shorter commutes to work, but we had to be prepared to travel a little bit more. Moving to a rural provincial area means you might not necessarily have access to things like the exhibitions, the zoo, things like concerts that you might have been used to. Yeah, there'll be other things like farmers markets and stuff like that you can go to. There's still the pub bands and that, but
the large scale concerts and things, there aren't as many around. Yeah. Another area that means that you end up having to travel is for things like specialist doctors. So while there's a hospital around and there's certainly GPs around, if there's anything slightly tricky for the kids or for the grandparents or us, we end up often having to travel to go see good specialists. So it might be an hour on the plane or it might be a 4-hour drive, but that ends up chewing up a bit of time if you need to do that for any reason. And when you're thinking about making a sea change or a tree change, you don't think, oh, I'm going to need a specialist doctor. But the reality of life is that often that does end up happening. So yes, we definitely get a lot of time back from not having to have long commutes, but then we also have to use a lot of that time to overcome the distance from metropolitan specialist services in any way, shape, or form. So if you are considering doing a sea change or a tree change, that's not a reason to not do it, but think about what you want from a lifestyle. If you really want the quiet lifestyle where you don't necessarily need lots of different things like zoos and museums and things like that, then a sea change, tree change will definitely be for you. But if you're actually at the art gallery every second week or something, then thinking about moving to the region may not work as well. Another issue that I wish we'd known or thought a little bit more about before we decided to make a sea change was the issue of what to do with your career path. Now, don't get me wrong, with all of the latest advances in technology, and especially since the COVID era, you can do remote working. So you can do a heck of a lot of jobs remotely from the regions that you couldn't do when we moved in 2017. So there's loads more career paths available working after a sea change or a tree change now than there used to be. But it's still not every career path that you can do that with. So if you're one of the doers who just needs an internet connection to be able to do your job, you pretty much can do that from there. But if you end up ever wanting to go down the management path, you usually end up having to go to a big metropolitan centre.
Or at least be prepared to travel to that metropolitan centre.
Quite regularly. So we know people in our region that are quite high up in large companies in management positions, and they do exactly that. They travel quite a bit. So the family gets all of the advantages of being in the regions, but either mum or dad is away for quite a bit of the time. And for us, that defeated the purpose of moving to the regions to be able to have more time with our kids. So we've chosen not to go down that path. When we made the sea change, tree change decision, one of the things that we were really looking forward to was having a close group of friends that we would hang out with on a Friday night to decompress from the week of work. They'd live close by, we'd just be able to walk to each other's houses. And it could be quite a close-knit community that was a lot of fun to just hang out with. But in reality, it was a little bit harder than that.
Yeah, I grew up from growing up here in the provincial area, moving back here. I thought I kind of almost would slot back in. But what I found personally was I'd moved on a lot from some of my other friends that I used to have, and we didn't share the same interests anymore. So starting again, being a bit older, it's a bit harder, and you've really got to make the effort. You know, you can't just wait on your phone to ring and someone say, "Hey, you want to catch up?" You've got to put that effort in yourself. So doing things like joining clubs or organising groups and meetings with other people, you've got to put that effort in to try and grow that network of friends.
And just really be willing to become friends with anyone who comes along, because you never know where that ends up leading to. So it just takes a little bit of a change of mentality. It wouldn't be a reason not to do a sea change, but it's something to be aware of and to be ready for. That it can be tougher to break into already set up friendship groups in smaller communities. But in the long run, it's really worth it, because in the long run, if you put that effort in and you have those friends, it's so nice to just be able to walk around the corner and hang out with another family that entertains the kids, and you get on with the parents. It's really worth it. The last thing that I wish we'd known or we'd thought about before we made the sea change, tree change decision was that no matter how much you change your environment or no matter how far you move away, you still take yourself with you.
What do you mean by that?
So the easiest way to explain it is they've done quite a number of studies where they've looked at people who have won the lottery and they've looked at people who have gone to prison. And what they've actually found is that after a year or two after you win the lottery, you're about as happy or sad as you were before you won the lottery. And about a year or two after you go to prison, you're about as happy or sad as you were before you went to prison. And what I mean by that is that you can change your environment and that will shift your equilibrium, that will shift how you feel about life for a while, but it will always tend to swing back to where you were previously.
Unless you changed your mindset.
Yeah. So what I hadn't really put into account when we made the decision for the sea change was the fact that the sea change wasn't the silver bullet that was going to solve everything. It was definitely going to take a lot of stresses out of our lives, but it didn't take every stress out of our lives, and it didn't stop other stresses from replacing the ones that had been taken out. And so really what it meant was that to be happy, to be contented, to be satisfied with how much I was growing and flourishing actually still took work even after the sea change. So certainly something needed to work on before the sea change, but after the sea change also had to work on it. And that's been probably one of the biggest lessons from the sea change, has been that we've loved it. We've certainly enjoyed it and we don't regret it at all. But it's not a panacea and it doesn't solve everything. So in fact, over the many years we've had since we made the sea change in 2017, we've done a lot of work on ourselves. We've done a lot of personal growth, a lot of professional growth, to be able to be in a position where we really enjoy and love the life that we have. And making the sea change was part of that, but it was far from the majority of it. In fact, the majority of it was really us working together as a couple and working individually in our own personal development and professional development. And we've learned so much in that space that one of the things we've actually done is we've started making a course on all of the things that we've done to live the flourishing life that we're living, both professionally and at home. So there's a link to the course below. If you're interested in hearing any of those learnings and how much we've developed over these years post sea change, check us out in the link below.